At 5 o'clock, we told you the story of a Kalamazoo County man who was finally able to clear his name 5 years after he drove away from a stop by police. Michigan's Supreme Court says violated his civil rights.
It's a story that you'll only see on Channel 8 in Part 2 tonight. Amanda Porter has more on what you need to know if you're ever in the same situation. Amanda?
The United States Constitution gives all Americans rights, and the Fourth Amendment protects from government action that is improper regarding illegal searches and seizures, and even detainment. Kalamazoo County man Douglas Prude took his case all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court, who ruled in his favor. Now here's what you need to know to stay safe and protect your civil rights.
Okay. Being in a police interaction can be a highly intense situation, something Douglas Prude knows all too well. He was visiting his girlfriend at the Fox Ridge apartment complex in Kalamazoo back on May 30th in 2019 when two Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety officers on patrol tried to detain him as they tried to figure out if he was trespassing on the property. Prude felt the officers were violating his rights, so he drove away. Prude would later be charged with fleeing and eluding and resisting arrest. But according to a Michigan Supreme Court ruling, Prude was well within his legal rights. Police can legally have consensual conversations with pedestrians and drivers. That can open the door to an investigation or reasonable suspicion, but there's a fine line between what's reasonable suspicion and what's a constitutional violation.
To hold otherwise, they said, would subject all of us to being able to be detained by the police for investigation, and that's not consistent with our Constitution. That's not consistent with the legal principles of the United States of America.
We're going to really look into that. That's just something, court decisions come down all the time, and that's how we learn and train and get better, and we have to adjust based on a court ruling. That's what governs us, how we do our jobs, and this was a case where we need to probably look at that and say, okay, this is the way we've always operated, this is the policy of the apartment complex, but is that a good enough standard? Now, obviously, this is 2019, this hasn't really come up like that since, but we'll look at that, how we're enforcing that at the apartment complex.
Well, it's tough because, everybody has rights, and it's, it can be frustrating for both parties when, you're a citizen and you're hanging out and you're just trying to live your life, and then you're like, oh, the police are on me, but then they're like, hey, I'm just trying to make sure it's safe here.
But we police in a free society, and that's one of the most challenging things.
Yeah.
Because people have rights, so you just can't stop people for no reason. You can't search them for no reason, which is good. That's the way it should be. You don't want to live I wouldn't want to live in a society where officers can stop me for no reason, or officers could get in my pockets and search me without a reason, or stop my car for no reason. We have to have a reason. That's what's important. That's what's important for our officers, to take the time to articulate the reasons they have.
In Douglas Prude's case, the Supreme Court said he had a right to drive away from a Kalamazoo apartment complex in 2019, but fleeing from police or evading detainment can be dangerous. Vince Colella is a civil rights attorney with 30 years experience.
Safety is first. And you have to understand, from a police officer's perspective, for whatever the reasons may be, they can enter into a situation with some anxiety, with some aggressiveness, and if you start to defy their authority or give them reasons to feel that they are unsafe for any reason, even if it's just their own subjective belief, you are putting yourself in harm's way.
Many people run from the police for fear of wrongful arrest, police brutality, or even death. And a wrongful arrest or conviction can have life-changing impacts on a person, from loss of agency, employment, housing, income, trust, and more. In Prude's case, it took years to get Michigan's High Court to review his case and overturn the charges. Still, civil rights attorneys urge citizens to not argue or run from the police. Simply record the interaction and do everything you can to preserve your rights. With the Prude Michigan Supreme Court ruling, Colella says officers are now on notice.
It is now clearly established that a hunch about a person in a high crime area it doesn't rise to the level of reasonable suspicion to allow them to be detained. So what we're asking officers to do is follow the clearly established rules by our courts, by the Sixth Circuit, which is the federal appellate division. We are asking them to follow the rules that have been established. From the citizens' standpoint, again, you may have a right. You may have a right to resist. You may have a right to not be detained under some circumstances. But exercising those rights can be dangerous.
I spoke with Carlton Mayers, a national public safety and policing reform expert, about the dangers of running from police and how police can avoid violating citizens' rights moving forward.
More proof, more proof, more proof in order to show that this was justified and constitutional, okay? So that's where the difference is going to lie. And for law enforcement now, they're going to have to train and also have this reflected in their policies in Michigan that you cannot just say reasonable suspicion is high crime activity area. To me, you need to make sure you get people from that area in the trainings that have to do with direct police civilian interactions like implicit bias, de-escalation, crisis intervention techniques, cultural sensitivity.
Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards Executive Director Tim Burgoyne says training adjustments will be made after the Prude ruling.
We're in the process of developing what continuing professional education looks like. As you can imagine, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of topics that one can train on each year.
KDPS says they are taking steps to make sure everyone's rights are upheld and the community is safe.
If some of our existing training needs to be increased, or maybe we'll look at some different things. But I'm really appreciative of MCOLS now is instead of just mandating these trainings, they're actually helping departments with funding for these trainings.
Experts say the bottom line, know your rights and stick to the script.
Indicate that you are not consenting to a search, okay? And let the officers know that you will not speak except with an attorney. And it's not, you have to make it clear that if you believe that you are being arrested, that you say, I want my attorney.
Running from police can be dangerous, even if justified. It's better to take your case to court and try to change the system.
For the Michigan Supreme Court to stand up and to take notice of a federal issue, if you will, a Fourth Amendment issue, and find in favor of a citizen and to establish a rule that should be recognized by every court in the country is a significant victory for people in this state. And I think if courts are looking at well-reasoned decisions, whether they be from other states or the federal appellate bench or even the U.S. Supreme Court, it adds credence. It adds sort of a support for better decision-making by our courts across the board. Because we have to, at some point, you got to draw the line. And if it means that a Michigan Supreme Court has chosen to do that, maybe other courts will follow. We get the domino effect that then kind of, makes its way up to the federal courts and to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they start looking at things the way that this court did, which is, in my opinion, the right way.
Prude does not have this case on his record and had an order of acquittal on his behalf. In the studio, Amanda Porter, News 8.